Hey, I'd like to welcome you to another episode of Mission Matters. My name is Adam Torres, and if you'd like to apply to be a guest in the show, just head on over to missionmatters.com and click on Be Our Guest to apply. All right, so today's guest is Paul Hynek, and he's an entrepreneur, professor, and futurist, and the name of his company is Machine Elves. Paul, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Adam. Happy to be here.
All right, Paul, I know you were sent over to us from Kate, who's running the Sovereign Tech Summit. That's going to be, by the time this is released, it's possible that may have just passed. I know it's coming up in a day or so, or 2 days or so. But that being said, can you tell us a little bit more about the summit and how you're participating?
Yeah, it's all about positive tech and sort of a optimistic look at AI and open source technology and art as well. And it's going to be in Santa Monica, and it's not going to be typical lectures, but much more interactive with panels and interactive discussions. So it's going to be really fun.
Awesome. Well, awesome to hear this. And I want to get into your background. So Machine Elves, you're an entrepreneur, professor, futurist. Like how'd you get started in your career? Where else begin for you?
So I'm a Wharton MBA, and I teach finance and cryptocurrency at Pepperdine and made software that does financial projections for startups. I've got sort of the financial side down, but my interests are a little bit more fringy, let's say. My father was an astrophysicist and rocket scientist and astronomer and advised the U.S. Air Force for 20 years about UFOs. And at first he was very skeptical, and he came to believe that there was a phenomena. Doesn't mean they're from other planets, but that there is a phenomena. And the movie Close Encounters of the Third Kind was based on his work and used his title. So I grew up in a scientific household that was curiously open to different types of phenomena.
How fun was that around the dinner table? Like I have a lot of conversations with like entrepreneur parents. They're talking about this, talking about that. I'm like, man, I wish that would have been a cool conversation to have with my dad about like, so what are you working on? What are you working on at work, Pops?
Yeah, where did the Air Force send you today? Are you going back to Roswell tomorrow? And meanwhile, my brother is making nitroglycerin in the basement and jet engines in the backyard.
Stop. This is greatness. I love it. So what was it like? What kind of affected on you as a kid? I mean, just even the way you view the world, like your lenses. I feel like when you're growing up in an environment where you have, first off, you're very obviously you come from good genes in terms of the intellect side of things. Everything that you've discussed takes quite a bit of intellectual power to accomplish, number one. But number two, to like grow up and to have a different lens that you're viewing the world with, in my opinion. I don't want to, project that on you, but that's what I see so far in talking to you. Like, what was that like?
You can project a kind of compliment on me anytime. Well, I see the world as being peopled with two different types of folks. One is people who are okay with questions they can't answer, and the other group are not okay with their answers being questioned. And I think it breaks the world into, there's sort of an intellectual fault line that separates those two camps. And if you're going to be interested in UFOs or ghosts or supernatural phenomena, which may or may not be objectively real, you have to be comfortable with this kind of awkward resting point of saying, yeah, I think something's going on, and I have no idea what it is. Since we're pattern-seeking mammals, we're not typically comfortable encountering or looking at a phenomena without having a prepackaged answer to make us feel nice and tidy.
And so you have, I mean, obviously a wide range of interests, and then you have, you're a professor, of course, and so now and correct me if I'm off on this, but with your concept of a Bitcoin astronomy and the path you've taken, you're kind of combining a lot of your different skill sets, whether it's thinking about the supernatural, Bitcoin, like all these kind of meld. Like, help me make sense of that.
Yeah, it's a lot of stuff to tie together. So the underlying thread that I see between potential aliens, which may or may not be extraterrestrial or interdimensional, and DMT, which is a whole other thread to go, or rabbit or wormhole to go down, and Bitcoin is artificial intelligence. And I think artificial intelligence is an unfortunate phrase. I prefer digital intelligence because it's not laden with that sort of inappropriate framing towards humans and that sort of condescending look. Digital intelligence is just sort of neutral and clinical. And if aliens are coming here from other planets, are they really sending their A-team? That's one question. And then the other question is, are they sending living, breathing, biological beings, or would they send sentient AI bots for, 55 million light years of travel? Then you have DMT, the most powerful psychedelic in the world. I personally believe it's not a hallucinogenic drug, but that it's a plant medicine technology that allows people to have this hyper clarity vision of the world. And Bitcoin obviously is digital, but the way that Bitcoin is related is when we colonize Mars, which is going to happen soon, will they use the U.S. dollar and carefully monitor Fed broadcasts to see which way the interest rates are blowing? I don't think so. I think they'll use Bitcoin. Then they'll get tired because they can't mine Bitcoin, and they'll create Mars coin. Bitcoin will gradually be called Earth coin, and it will represent our planetary credit score. And I believe that all civilizations in the universe, almost inevitably, if they have individuals with individual rational economic motives, if they have finite resources and they don't have magic, will develop something roughly analogous to a proof of work governance protocol store of value such as Bitcoin.
And what's interesting about this? It's usually, to me, and this is the way I view, so I come from a finance background too, and I kind of look at it like a lot of the world is just this bar chart or this graph, right? And so as we're looking at the moment in time and continuum of history, if you just kind of look further and further back, and depending on the graph, right? If you're looking at it, what you just now said, for some people, that may be what? How is this going to happen? How is that going to happen? But look at, depending on how many years you want to go back, just look at the beginning of the United States. Going out west would have once been considered this craziness. What? You're going to continue going west? Or look before that, going across the ocean to go to the United States, obviously, which wasn't called that then, obviously. But that would have been considered what? No, the world ends at that end. So if you just keep on looking further and further back, it becomes more plausible and just actually more logical. It's one day, who knows how many years, I don't know, but whatever the amount of years is, they'll look back and be like, oh my gosh, remember when they only lived on Earth? That was crazy.
Right. And, going way back, I think the first blockchain is 46,000 years old. Graded on a curve for the technology of the time, because a blockchain is a distributed, immutable ledger that people can't change. And 46,000 years ago, they had a baboon femur with a bunch of femur bone with a bunch of notches in it for accounting. And that's the most distributed they can make it. In 12th century England, there was about 14.5 million pounds of power in the economy. Only 500,000 pounds were represented in coins. They didn't have paper. They didn't have plastic. So 14 million pounds, the bulk of the English economy, was represented by tree branches. They were called tally sticks. And you take a willow branch, a foot long, and there were certain conventions okay, Paul owes Adam his sorghum harvest for next year. And we make these notches in there so that everybody can understand that. And then we cut that stick in half vertically. You get half and I get half. If I'm the one that owes you, I get the way it's cut. I get the shorter end of the stick. I get the foil. I'm foiled again. You get the one with the stock on the end, the longer stick. You're the stock holder. And that was a distributed ledger that is immutable and was used into the 20th century in France to pay taxes.
Amazing. So we took them back in time just now.
That's right.
So now let's go a little bit more present day. What are you working on right now? What's interesting to you right now?
Well, so I'm kind of CFO by day, UFOs by night. I grew up with UFOs, and so I'm very familiar with that kind of fringy, pushed out the envelopes of mainstream science. But I just feel that I think there's enough evidence to suggest that there is a phenomena, but I think the extraterrestrial hypothesis is wanting. We're a long way away. How do they even find us, even though we've been beaming episodes of I Love Lucy out low these many decades? It just doesn't seem to ring true to me. And there are a lot of people who think that there may be something interdimensional about it. Then a friend of mine told me about a book called Alien Information Theory. Alien Information Theory is the sexiest book title ever, which is about DMT, which I'd never heard about before, and that it's a potential portal to this other dimension. So purely in the interest of science, Adam, I started taking one for the team and doing DMT, seeing if I could go to that, call it dimension, and ask the machine elves, as Terence McKenna calls them, the denizens of the DMT verse, if they're related to UFOs. And they told me, in effect, that they were. Okay, I can't take that into a court of law, but it was encouraging enough for me to continue my research. And so that's my big passion now, is seeing if I can use these repeatable experiences and actually bring back evidence that moves the needle for science, like unambiguous mathematical questions and answers, because so far mainstream science kind of poo-poos ghosts and ETs and all this. And if there's something real there, I want to inculcate in the various experiencer communities a protocol, a proactive protocol, to try to influence the events, to get evidence that scientists will look at and say, okay, now you're speaking our language.
Yeah. What do you think happens when we finally do get some type of real evidence? Because if we look back, I guess let's go back for a second. Like before, bacteria, like at one point we didn't know what that was, right? And then all of a sudden we know what that is, and different organisms and things like that. That was equivalent to, obviously now we think of it as common sense, but that was equivalent to, I don't know if I would say, it might be a stretch to say it was equivalent to discovering like a species or aliens or something. But back then when it actually happened, you could argue like that was that amazing, like that out there, right? Like people would have thought that was the craziest thing ever. And now it's common knowledge. Like, what do you think happens when we finally do, when or whatever, we get some like irrefutable, like, what do you think happens?
Well, that's a good question. People used to think about like disclosure or UFOs, like a flying saucer would land on the lawn of the White House and Walter Cronkite would narrate it and the game over. But disclosure, as it's called, is not like your father's situation, because if a Republican administration discloses it, half the country won't believe them and vice versa. And so even if they do try to disclose it, I don't think anybody can tell what kind of threads it might rip through national security, what kind of panic it would cause. But one thing I believe is that I don't know if the government has spaceships or alien bodies or has reverse engineered propulsion systems. But if they do, even though I have very good friends who are writing legislation to force them to disclose this information, I don't think they will. Because if you're a diehard military guy, you didn't sign up for compliance to pasty-faced pencil pushers on Capitol Hill. You signed up for full spectrum dominance. And they'll be damned if they're going to give up the crown jewels of the technology, no matter where they got it from.
Yeah, and I'm definitely not jaded at all, so I won't use that word for myself, but I just wouldn't be surprised. Like that's more like me. And I don't know if that makes me compliant, but I just mean like, like maybe that's it. I don't know. Like, can I?
Well, it could happen. And a good friend of mine, Danny Sheehan, is an amazing Harvard-trained attorney who has worked on all sorts of cases and is working on the legislation now. And one of the things he's done, he's gone to the inspectors general of various government agencies and said, look, do you guys understand by law you need to release all the information they have? And like you said, Adam, these guys are there for compliance. So that's what they're interested in. So he's actually getting parts of the government to champion the release of this information. We tended to think of the U.S. government, whether it's in relation to Bitcoin or UFOs or whatever, as this monolithic block acting in concert. Nothing could be further from the truth. All kinds of turf battles and different folks.
If we thought that was like this well-honed piece of things that work, then I guess we forgot that there's humans with prefrontal cortexes running the show, right?
That's right. It's just, so, I guess maybe I'm with you that I would be a little bit surprised if we have, say, a capital D disclosure. I mean, we've already had the Navy say, hey, we see UFOs and we see USOs, unidentified submersible objects, all the time, and we're scared for the safety of our aviators.
Yeah.
That's already kind of a disclosure. So if we're going to get that classic, and now if we get a video, okay, if you see a video of a UFO landing on the lawn of the White House, the first call you're going to make is to OpenAI, right? So it's very difficult.
Yeah. Or you're going to be looking at, all right, well, who created this? What's going on? And the
what
proof. What kind of AI created this? Yeah, what generated this?
Yeah.
Oh, you know what's funny about that? I don't even know if I'd say funny. I was just looking at, I don't know what it was, a documentary or something like that, and it came out about the old Orson Welles when he was doing that broadcast that put the nation in a panic over like we're being. Think about it. Obviously many of the people are not going to remember that, or obviously most are no longer possibly going to be around when that happens. But they got us once. Orson Welles tricked us once. We're not going to let OpenAI trick us a second time. Orson got us already once.
I mean, and if you listen to that broadcast, I mean, they had things in there that obviously couldn't happen. Like they had a reporter in New York who's in New Jersey 5 minutes later, and still people believe it.
Oh man, this is good, Paul. Let's go. I want to go further into Machine Elves. Like talk to me about the company and the goal. Like, what's the goal of the company?
So, I have software that does financial projections for startups, and it's raised over $2 billion for thousands of startups. Because what I found is I love startup founders. They are broken people who are born on the island of broken toys and can't understand that they cannot change the world. And because they can't understand that, they actually can. So I love the energy of startups. And, I'm a software guy, and software folks, we think we can hack everything. Like, I was written about in Medical Journal for reversing my age. And I think that startup founders have the best energy. And unfortunately, a lot of them don't know how to speak investorese. So they don't know the dynamics of getting money, when you should get money, how you get it, how you negotiate it, how you present the company, or even how they can understand the company themselves, how money comes in and money goes out, beyond the fact that they've got this new router that's going to put Cisco out of business. So I stepped in, and I like to work with startup founders and give them this template that they can use to do their numbers, so that when the investor asks them, hey, how'd you get these projections, they don't have that deer in the headlights look because they were talking to me and they weren't really paying attention.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And so is there any particular niche in the startup founder space that you're working with, just in general? Or is it agnostic?
I've worked everything from spaceships to nanotechnology and everything in between. Once it gets down to the finance level, the business model might be different, but everything else is the same. You're hiring people, you're paying them money, you're buying capital expenditures, you're doing some financing of some kind. So it doesn't really matter. My sweet spot has been historically entertainment technology. I worked in visual effects on Avatar, Lord of the Rings, Planet of the Apes, and then we sold our company to James Cameron. So that's the business I'm most personally familiar with, but I've worked in agriculture and all kinds of other businesses as well.
That's great. So what excites you right now? Let's jumping around a little bit. So in AI, the conversation with AI, everything's moving pretty fast, I would argue, and I guess that's relative, but to me, it's moving pretty fast. What excites you right now in this space?
The fact that people now are looking at AI in a somewhat more positive light. We've had all these dystopian views with The Matrix and Terminator about AI taking over. And look, for me, I'm less concerned about the future of artificial intelligence than I am about the present of human stupidity. Will we even make it, Adam, until the computers take over? Please, hurry up, get here already. But now people are seeing how much
on that one I am jaded, Paul. On that one I am. The other one I wasn't. On that one I'm like, it wouldn't surprise me, but that one is a jaded wouldn't surprise me. Go ahead.
All right, cool. So,
unfortunately.
And people are worried about AI taking jobs, but let's say like in writing, a really good writer has a unique feel, like Stephen King. There's no AI that can replace Stephen King because he's got a very unique kind of warped view of the world. So the really good writers like Stephen King will probably use AI for some of the more drudgery aspects of their work. It's the people in the middle that are not very good that will get displaced by AI, but they'll get displaced by people who couldn't have done it before. So my friends Ray Kurzweil, I have another friend who worked at OpenAI, they don't think that we're going to lose jobs. They think we'll have full employment. And they go back to 100 years ago or so when so many of Americans were farmers. And if you had told them, hey, 100 years from now, there will only be 1% of people working on farms, but everybody else will have jobs that we can't think of now, I'm in the camp that thinks that AI will actually usher in new prosperity and full employment.
Yeah, I'm definitely in that camp that there's going to be more opportunity. The pie is going to get bigger. It's just going to get bigger and bigger. There's going to be more for those that, and now will there be the casualties along the way of those that maybe either can't adapt? I'm not saying it's always somebody's fault, or whether they choose not to. I mean, that's a given, right? Like that's part of progress, and not everybody is going to win, but as a whole, I'm on that camp. I'm like, the pie is going to get bigger. Like, we've seen it time and time again. If the human spirit remains the same, if we continue to want to grow and thrive as a species, then I don't see how we don't continue. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, in Yuval Harari's book *Sapiens*, he talks about the transition from hunter-gathering to agriculture. And it was not good for the first people that doing agriculture, because hunter-gatherers, they had a pretty good life and a varied diet, and they walked around a lot. And then when they started doing agriculture, they have to protect land, so they have to have warfare, and they're maybe only going to eat one crop. So we're about to have this unbelievable pivot, and it could be very disruptive for the short term. But after that, I think it's just going to be a fantastic age. And then we head into a singularity where, all bets are off. It's impossible to know what will happen. I think the risks and returns are greater than before. Like, if our great-great-great-great-grandfathers were sitting down around a table saying, hey, in the future, our great-great-great-grandkids, Adam and Paul, will be able to fly around the world. Dentistry will largely be pain-free, and they can have food in a refrigerated cabinet in their house, they would have said, that's great. But there will be bombs pointed at their heads 24 hours a day of a size and magnitude you can't imagine. They would have said, oh, I don't know. And I think the future has even greater rewards and even greater risks than our great-great-grandfathers could have even envisioned.
Amazing. Paul, this has been great having you on the show today. I learned a lot. This has been a lot of fun. Great conversation. If somebody wants to continue to follow your work, what's the best way for them to do that?
Yeah, good luck. I have a pretty anemic social media footprint. I guess on Twitter, just @PaulHynek.
All right, and so we'll end the show notes so people can definitely follow you on Twitter. And speaking to the audience, if this is your first time listening to Mission Matters, hey, this is a daily show. Each and every day we're bringing you new content, new guests, new ideas, and hopefully new inspiration to help you along in your journey. If that sounds interesting to you or exciting, hit that subscribe or follow button. We sure would like to have you back here for some more episodes. And Paul, again, thank you so much for coming on the show. It's been a lot of fun.
Pleasure, Adam.